I would prefer to refer them as a 3-course meal. Normally, if you go to any fine dining restaurant, there will be a 3-course meal in the name of starter, main course, and a dessert. Starter generally contains of soup and snacks. Main course is the real meal depending upon the nature of restaurant. It could be roti, rice, curries, dal, sambar, whatever, etc., etc. That is the main course, which is the core meal that somebody is going to have. And the dessert part is only about having an ice cream or a sweet or a fruit, which is to end the meal on a sweeter note. That is normally what we experience in a fine dining restaurant, but that's only a generic symbolism which we can take for the purpose of our income tax syllabus. How can we apply that to the income tax syllabus? For example, if you look at the starter part, in income tax learning, first of all, we should understand the core concepts of income tax, what is income tax, why income tax, and what are the features of income tax law, what are the components of income tax law. All of these basic concepts will have to be learned at first. In addition to them, we need to focus and try to understand some of the important terminology that is going to be used in this act. Because whenever we particularly focus on any subject, or to be very specific, legal subjects, the terminology plays a very crucial role. Right now, we used 2 words, law and act. If we are not clear about the distinction between them, we tend to use these words very loosely, and that is not what is expected of a professional student or a professional himself. So, terminology plays a very crucial role. We need to understand some of the definitions, and we need to understand some of the terms related to Income Tax Act. That is also part of the starter. And we need to be very comfortable in calculating the income tax using different rates of tax that are applicable to different kinds of people, and that is a basic calculational, computational requirement related to computation of tax on the incomes of different types of SSEs. Now you would have observed we already used a new word, SSE. So these type of words we use very frequently in future also. But we need to understand them well whenever we are using them. No need to by heart the definitions, but if we understand them, that would be generally more than enough. SSE has its own definition, which we can go through later. But more than that, what an SSE means, simply, though exactly not same, in simple terms, a taxpayer. In other words, the person of whose income we are calculating or assessing is the SSE. So different types of SSEs will be there, and we can see all those categories when we look at the definitions part of the Income Tax Act. So depending upon the type of the SSE, the rates of tax will be different, and according to the rates of tax applicable to each type of SSE, we need to compute the income tax liability of such SSEs. That is a separate topic, mostly computational topic, but it is also part of the basic concepts and part of the starter that we will focus on in the coming days. In addition to that, the topic related to residential status of SSEs and how that will impact their computation of income is a very important topic that also we can call it as a starter, because without understanding the scope of the income, without understanding whether a particular income is taxable in India or not, we cannot proceed further. That is why all these things put together, we can consider them as starters for learning the income tax law. Just to quickly recapitulate, the starter part includes basic concepts of income tax, some of the definitions and terminology of income tax, and rates of tax and computation of tax liability, and determination of residential status and tax incidence. These are all the part of the starter menu. Then, of course, if you observe the syllabus sheet, there is one more thing which is related to the exemptions. Exemptions are the ones which are popularly called as incomes which do not form part of total income. Incomes which do not form part of total income, we can also call them exemptions. As part of the syllabus, in the sequence, as far as ICAI material is concerned, it is chapter 3. But it would be practically more easier as well as beneficial if we learn this at a later stage than now. Why is that? Because most of these exemptions we will encounter, we will tackle in different heads of incomes anyway in future. So if we try to understand an exemption related to the chapter, say capital gains, at the beginning it would be impossible to understand what is the purpose of that exemption, why is it useful, where is it useful. All these things will be complicated if we don't even understand what is capital gains. So naturally, it would be better and scientific to learn those exemptions which are specifically contained in the heads of income when we discuss the topics related to those heads of income. Means exemptions which are related to the chapter salaries will be learned along with the chapter salaries. Similarly, exemptions which are related to the chapter capital gains will be learned along with the chapter capital gains. Like that, we will learn them, but at that time when we have relevance of those things in the respective heads of incomes. Of course, there are certain exemptions which are not really applicable to any particular head of income, which are generic exemptions. They can be learned in the beginning also, they can be learned in the end also. There is no big deal with them. So according to our convenience, we will go with those generic exemptions either as a starter or as a dessert. Either way, it's not going to have much of difference. Say those are all like water. You can have them anytime. It's not going to make any difference while you are having the meal. But after the starter is finished, the next level will be related to the heads of income, which is the main course. What is heads of income is nothing but different sources of income which are earned by different types of people. What could be the sources of income for people? People can earn income by working for somebody, and then we call it salaries. People can earn income by having a property and renting it out, then we call it income from house property. Or people can do something on their own as a business, or the companies, partnership firms and other types of organizations will do business, or some of them may carry on their professions like chartered accountants, doctors, lawyers, architects, etc., film actors. So business or profession is one of the major sources of income for different kinds of people. So that income is covered under the head of profits and gains of business or profession, which we will refer to in future as PGBP. PGBP is the word we are going to use. So every time we use the word PGBP, it's an acronym, and abbreviation of that acronym is profits and gains of business or profession. But let me just warn you at this time, while we learn, while we practice, we can use the word PGBP, no problem, but in the examination we have to write the full form, preferably the entire name of the head of income, which is profits and gains of business or profession. But every time while discussing, if we use that, it is waste of time. So we just use the shortcut or acronym PGBP. So that is one of the sources of income. So that is one of the heads of income also. Or how the people can also make income, maybe by selling some assets. Let us say somebody has a house, they sold it and made some gain out of it. Somebody has shares, they sold them and made some gain out of it. Like this, by selling some of the capital assets, if somebody gains, if somebody earns some income, that's what is capital gains. That is another head of income. But practically, it is impossible for the Income Tax Act also, for any human being also, to understand what people can earn income from. There may be a variety types of incomes. People can go very creative and get incomes which will not fall under any of the categories. We cannot call it salaries also. We cannot call it income from house property also. We cannot call it PGBP also. We cannot call it capital gains also. Then people may say, since these are not categorized as any of the four, it is not income, I will escape from the assessment. But naturally the Income Tax Act and the lawmakers will not give such facility to the people. That is why we have a residuary head of income, that is income from other sources, which is an open-ended residuary head of income. We can call it a dustbin head of income. Whichever thing is not falling under any of the four heads, that will fall under this head of income from other sources. These are the 5 heads of incomes, which is the main course of this paper. And let me once again remind you, at least 40 marks out of 60 marks will be from these 5 heads of income. So this is the crux of income tax law. This is the crux of income tax paper. And these are the same 5 heads of income which will be there in final also. So income tax law or act, to be particular, is contained in these 5 heads of income, and all the provisions related to these 5 heads of income are going to be very crucial. Not only from examination point of view, even in real life, this is the crux of the Income Tax Act. That is the main course. That is why we are calling it main course, because it is the core aspects of the Income Tax Act. Now, the law will not have only these things. It will have some other additional special provisions which are not normally imaginable, but because Income Tax Act has special nature, there are certain things which are to be dealt with separately. For example, normally common sense says how income of a person should be assessed. Sir, if a person earns the income, his income has to be assessed in his hands. Naturally, he has to pay it since it is a direct tax. That's how we normally think. But there are certain circumstances where income of other persons are included in the income of that SSC. Means what? Other persons are earning the income in reality, but the other person who is actually earning the income is not the one who is going to pay tax on that. Such income is going to be included in the hands of somebody else. So, that is a variety thing. Definitely yes. But what is that variety? In what circumstances we have to do that is another topic. Basically, we can call that as income of other persons included in the total income of SSC. Such a big name can be avoided. Simply, we call it clubbing of income. Clubbing of income is what we use in future. When we say clubbing, we are talking about clubbing means mixing of other person's income in the income of SSC. When is that? How is that? Why is that? All that will be discussed in that chapter. Small chapter, a logical chapter. That will be a dessert. That is not a main course. That will be only useful after we already know majority of the provisions related to the heads of income. So clubbing is one of the topics. Another topic is set off and carry forward of losses. That is one more topic. And very important, another topic is deductions from the gross total income. We can popularly call them as section 80 deductions or chapter 6A deductions. That is another topic part of the dessert. And provisions related to some of the assessment procedures like tax deducted at source, tax collected at source, provisions related to advance tax when they have to be paid, and provisions related to return of income when the return of income has to be filed. These are all procedural aspects. These are not like problem solving aspects. These are procedural aspects which definitely are very important and useful in real life. But of course, as part of syllabus, there will be questions, theory questions, case-based questions from these topics also. So in a simple word, we use the common term called assessment procedures for all of them put together. So assessment procedures include all these topics: TDS, that is tax deducted at source; TCS, that is tax collected at source; and advance tax provisions, and return of income related provisions. All of them we call as assessment procedures. That is where the CA intermediate syllabus for income tax ends, and that is what the dessert gives us. So once again, just to summarize, the starter includes basic concepts, definitions, key terminology, rates of tax and computation of tax liability, residential status and tax incidence. This is all the first part, initial part, which we need to learn before even we go to the main course. The main course or the crux or the core of the Income Tax Act is the heads of incomes, which is salaries, income from house property, PGBP, capital gains, and income from other sources. Then the dessert part contains some of the procedural things and some of the assessment procedures. But what are the contents of the dessert part will be clubbing provisions, set off and carry forward provisions, deductions, chapter 6A deductions, and income tax deducted at source or collected at source, advance tax provisions, provisions related to filing the returns of income in relation to different types of SSCs. This is the syllabus of income tax portion in relation to CA intermediate. And of course, beyond this, there is no much of Income Tax Act that is left. But what is that remaining portion of it? you will anyway learn at a final level later. Right now, we need to focus on the syllabus that is applicable to CA intermediate level. Now, coming to the second aspect of this discussion, okay, this is the syllabus, there are chapters, we will learn all these provisions, what do they tell, that's all, it's okay, we can just approach income tax paper just like any other subject is what most of the students think, and that is where they face more challenges than others. Like any other subject, this paper also requires a specific strategy but not a generic strategy. What is that? First of all, for that to be designed, we need to understand the nature of the subject. As we all are aware, say for example, accounts is a subject which is conceptual in nature, and as far as the paper is concerned, examination is mostly numerical. All questions will be number based questions, and you have to solve those questions, compute things and give some answer in a best presented manner. More or less the same thing is applicable in costing also, which is a numerical paper. There also you will understand some concepts. Maybe you may have to remember some of the formulae there in costing, and you need to apply those formulae and concepts for solving the questions, and there also numerical questions. You will compute something and finally give the answer that has been asked in the question. Coming to the paper of law, that is not a numerical paper. That's a paper which has different theoretical aspects related to different acts, including Companies Act, Negotiable Instruments Act, Contract Act, etc. So you will understand those acts, you will remember some of the key provisions of those acts. There will be two aspects which will be tested in the law paper. One, you need to reproduce the law as it is in case of some of the questions which are directly asked, and in case if there are case based questions, you might have to apply the law that you know in the situation that has been presented to you. But both cases definitely are going to be text based questions only, but not numerical questions. So on a broader basis, if we classify the subjects, accounts and costing fall under the numerical category, law falls under text based subject category. I don't want to call it theory subject, because when you use the word theory, it gives a wrong impression that there is no practice. Theory is not something just as a theory. Law is also a very practical subject, but the practicality of it, application of it is also not going to be in a numerical sense. It is going to be a text based subject. So costing and accounts on numerical side, law on the text side. Then what about taxation, where this stands? That is a variety of this paper. It is on both sides. So what is the input that is required for taxation is mostly text based. All the provisions are going to be in English. We need to read them, we need to understand them, we need to interpret them. But when we actually apply them, we are not going to just apply them in a situation, we are going to apply them using numbers also. Means what? The application of the law, whether it is income tax law or for that matter GST, majority of the paper, I'm not saying the entire paper will be numerical questions, but majority of the paper, more than 80-85% of the paper will be numerical questions. Means the output that we are going to give is going to be in a number form, but the input that we are going to get is not in the number form, that is in the form of provisions, which is a vast theory of Income Tax Act and the provisions which are contained in that act. That is the first point we have to understand. This paper requires both numerical skills and text based skills related to memory. And just to cut it short and put it in simple words, if accounts and costing require more of your processor, if the paper of law requires more of your hard disk, the paper of taxation requires both of them almost equally, and any one of them failing is going to create a negative impact on the result of this paper. So the requirement here is multifaceted. Nobody can say, I don't want to by heart, I don't want to remember. Yeah, these are the words we badly use. By heart is a bad word. Yeah, if you use a bad word in a sense that you don't remember, you don't understand a thing, but still you just mug it up, yes, it is a bad word. But as such, memorizing is not a bad thing. Memorizing is required in chartered accounting. Particularly for papers like law and taxation, you need to have lots and lots of memory. And in particular to the taxation, that too for income tax law, you need to remember all the provisions which are contained in this act. That definitely occupies tremendous portion of your brain, and that is the hard disk portion of your brain. And at the same time, if you just keep it as a memory without being able to apply it, that is of no use. In this paper, you are not supposed to reproduce what you know. You are not supposed to just write what you know. You are supposed to apply what you know, which means all the questions will be application-oriented questions. Though there are a small portion of text-based application questions, most of the questions will be numerical questions, number-based questions. So we need to solve the problems and practice them a lot. Number of problems we have to solve and practice them a lot, just like costing. So that is where the trade-off, that is where the balance which is required for income tax, and that is what is the requirement of this paper, balancing the hard disk portion as well as the processor portion. If somebody is having only interest in processor part without having interest in hard disk part, it will be difficult for them to remember the provisions. If somebody has interest only in remembering things, not much applying them with logic and rationality, then also there will be trouble. So the point is very clear. I hope you are all understanding. This paper requires hard disk as well as processor almost equally. And while we approach this subject, while we learn this subject, my sincere suggestion is that you write a lot. Whatever you hear, whatever you read, you try to summarize all of that in your notes. So everybody must have, again, just like this subject, two portions of the notes for income tax. One portion will contain the theory part, which is the provisions part, or the key aspects, the crux of what we understand. For example, if you have to write down the points of today's audio lecture, you can just write down all of that in one page. That's enough. But you should write. You cannot just listen and forget. And not only this, once we enter into the real provisions, you need to write them. You don't have to reproduce the entire thing. Whatever is there in the Income Tax Act, you don't have to copy paste. But you just have to write the essence of it. So first and foremost point is, you need to write more for this paper. And very important aspect in this paper as a strategy and as a skill is reading skills. And I'm very sorry to say, most of the students I have observed so far, of course, I'm not particularly talking about your batch, but in general also, and yes, some of us in our batch also have a problem with reading. We are not reading properly. So that is going to be very dangerous if we don't develop the reading ability, and that has to be done meticulously again and again. So anybody who has issues with reading, they have to read more and more and practice reading well. So we need to develop the reading skills, we need to develop the writing more, and at the same time the numerical skills related to problem solving and computations are the skills that are required. But I will place all these skills on one side, and one of the most important things, which is the core, and that is where I see most of the people struggle or try to get it but still they fail, is memory. Tremendous amount of memory is required. You need to memorize the things. You need to have lots and lots of revisions in order to have all those things in your memory. So this is not some subject like we understand something and we can apply it. For example, subjects like costing and accounts, you just need to know the concepts, nothing much to memorize. But here you need to have lots and lots of memory, and that is one category or one key area, I would say, which will be almost the determining factor, I would say, for the positive result in this paper. Also for GST, the same kind of, I would say, the requirements will be applicable, but the law itself is completely different. So we cannot compare the income tax law with the GST. We'll come to that indirect taxes portion later. But as far as income tax law is concerned, these are the key strategies we should adopt. First of all, we should be very much aware of various things, how the syllabus is divided into, which portion is having how much weightage, and of course it does not mean according to the weightage our focus will change, but definitely according to the more weightage we have to focus more and practice more in those areas. So that one clarity on the syllabus is must. That is for any paper. Same is the case with income tax also. And second, we need to develop certain skills like reading, writing, and most importantly, memory has to be developed. Computational skills, I don't think will be very complicated in this particular paper because, as you know, end of the day, what are we going to do? Only the same 4 things: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Beyond that, there is no big computations we are going to do here. But memory definitely is going to be a crucial factor in obtaining good marks and securing good marks in this particular paper. So that is how the approach of this paper should be. With this, we'll conclude today's audio lecture. In the next lecture, we will try to understand some of the basic concepts of income tax. We'll start with that, and also some of the definitions which are contained in the Income Tax Act 1961. How to read them also we will try to understand slowly, and how to understand and interpret the provisions on a general basis. We'll start understanding all these things in the upcoming classes. Of course, it's a very long journey of a taxation. The syllabus is very huge, no doubt about it. But the point once again is similar. Like if you compare this with riding a bicycle, initially yes, riding a bicycle will not be that easy. You will fall down sometimes, you will have problems, you cannot go fast sometimes. So there will be a lot of issues naturally. So but as we get comfortable with the skill or the knack of cycling, then there is no stopping. We can just go quickly, we can just go smoothly, comfortably, without any problem. Till we reach that level, we need to be patient and we need to be more focused. And most importantly, we need to do the effort that is required. So I would request all of you to download ICA material. If you don't have the books in your hand, which is the ICA material is available on the website, BOS Knowledge Portal within ICA.org. You try to go through that. Don't try to by heart each and every word or something like that, but try to understand the essence of that. Whatever the topics we are going to discuss, the crux of that topic will be circulated to you through the WhatsApp group anyway. While going through that, you listen to this audio, and while listening to this audio, you make down some of the points which you feel which are very important. And the crux of every audio lecture should be there on paper with each of you. That will be the best and effective way of utilizing this opportunity. With that, I'll conclude this, and we'll discuss another topic next time. Thank you very much, and stay home, stay safe. Bye.